All right, well, I work with Michelle, or she's over there, work on developing these questions a little bit, and actually Michelle wrote most of them, so I modify them, we talk about them. But one of the things that came up in the first panel that was kind of interesting, I thought linkage between them was a matter of time and kind of time management and structure of course. And I thought we'd open it up to the group and just start with something simple and ask them, to what degree do you pay attention to that rule that we ask students about, right? The number of hours that we throw in the boilerplate outside of the classroom versus how much time you spend in the classroom. So we kind of have a 3-to-1 ratio sometimes that's thrown in there, and sort of have different numbers thrown in. So do you take that into consideration when you're developing your course, or is that just an item you pass forward? And if you do think about it, how does it inform what you do in constructing the course that you're on? Anybody can start.
Start with Fuller part.
Anyone, you can.
You're currently developing, so it's
You're
probably
doing one right now,
question
Joe.
for you.
So
Yeah, so for the courses that I do teach, what I try to do is get them to retain and take as much material in the class that they need. Then the out-of-class assignments, I try my best to limit it to a half hour after. Studying for exams, I actually pay them to study. So I give them 2 points, 2 extra credit points. You guys are looking at me like, you pay your students?
Can I take the notes?
Yeah, I give them 2 extra credit points to do practice quizzes that I put on Blackboard. So it makes it easy for them to encourage. Now, as you would guess, only about half of the students do that. But I give them those opportunities to be rewarded for the time they're going to put into studying for exams. And the homework, like I said, is typically no more than a half hour.
Okay. Take that.
Easier. Yeah.
I don't really think that there's a one-size-fits-all for every class and every student. And so I typically would teach 4 different classes, 4 different courses, and I think the level of difficulty varies, and it also varies from student to student. So I do tell students, it's on the syllabus, like what the recommendation is, but it has to be, I think, adjusted according to individual students' background preparation. Some actually come into our course maybe very well prepared and may be able to get by with less. And other students may have a huge gap in their background preparation, and so in order for them to be successful, they are going to have to just put in a whole lot more effort. The other thing is that everyone has a different kind of learning style, learning preference, and also their kind of just personal, academic kind of ability. And so I tell my students that as a student myself, I sat in an organic chemistry class. Cheryl is here, and my best friend at the time was sitting there in class, and I would take copious notes because that was how I best absorbed the material. If I wrote it down, I had a much better chance of kind of retaining it, but I would still have to go back and study and take time to do it. My friend would actually sit next to me and just sit back and not take any notes and just fold her arms and just listen. And she would end up getting usually the top grade in the whole class, every single exam. So it's frustrating to other students like me who really have to kind of work more at, being really successful in a course. But then I just learned that I need to do what I need to do. And so I can't compare myself to the person next to me. And so I tell the students, you have to figure it out for yourself too. So coming to the first exam, I think is always hard because they don't know what to expect. They don't know how far to, what the target is. But after that, I think it can kind of sort itself out. So no, I don't think that that needs to be a hard and fast rule. So those are the variations, and I talk about them with my students during the first couple of classes.
I totally agree with Caroline that it's not one size fits all, that we need to consider that different students, as she said, have different backgrounds, different experiences, and different styles. And we also, I think, need to remind our students of that because, as Caroline said, she looked at her best friend and probably at the time, why aren't you taking notes? And our students don't necessarily get that either. I also think that part of our jobs as an instructor is to not only teach them the content, but we need to help them to learn how to learn. And so reminding them of simple study strategies that perhaps they learned in their CAB 100 class, how to annotate a textbook, maybe showing them a specific example, how to study, give them study tips, what would be a good way to study for an exam in my class. In the video clip that Michelle shared with us, they talked about they like study guides. I know that some instructors don't like giving study guides. While you're in college now, you don't need that. Clearly, they're telling us the opposite, that they do want them. If you're uncomfortable with that, think about scaffolding your study guides. Maybe your first one is very detailed, and for your second test, it's a little bit less detailed, and your third one even less, until that they have the ability to create their own study guide by that final exam. So I think we need to help them through the whole learning process as well.
I agree with the one size doesn't fit all. For example, it has been many years since I've given an exam in my classes. That my classes are all project-based. Now, that doesn't mean though that I can't, or that I don't have to worry about the equivalent of study guides or the equivalent of helping students be prepared for the project. I can't just say, okay, here's the project, go do it. And part of what I do is I scaffold the work so that, so it's not, here, just go do this project, but here's the first step, the second step, the third step, which is part of what you're talking about, helping them learn. My students don't know how to do that, and they don't know how to do that not because they're poorly prepared, or not because they're stupid or lazy or anything like that. They don't know how to do it because I'm teaching an introductory course that teaches them how to do it. If they knew how to do this, they wouldn't need to take my class. So that becomes part of it. One of the things with, you asked about the amount of time. One of the things I noticed when I was reviewing the material for today is that Alec, you were talking about a 3-to-1 ratio. I know in our syllabi, the common syllabi that we use, it says 2-to-1. And so sometimes there can be a disconnect of different messages. It used to be 3-to-1. I'm not sure when that got changed. But if we're still thinking that, and our students are thinking something else, and they're thinking 2-to-1 is unrealistic in itself, you get these, you get the problems with it. But one of the things I try to do is that on a Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday schedule, I'm very conscious of the homework I'm giving for the second day of the week. And the homework for either the Wednesday or the Thursday class is much lighter than I would give for the Monday or Tuesday class, because I realize students only have 48 hours, and during that 48 hours, they have work, they have all kinds of other things. So I try to take that into consideration.
So the follow-up to that for the panel then is, to what degree do you consider pacing for your course? Right, so Steve's mentioning it with a Monday to Wednesday or Tuesday to Thursday connection. But if you're looking at a typical 15-week course, or maybe even a 7-week course, whatever your structure may be, to what degree do you have the students assign work or material or even concepts that be more difficult, that are either compact, or is it a building process, or is there kind of a flurry activity at different moments of time, or expectations? How do you structure your classes for students to work their way through that?
Since I brought that up, I'll start. I take pacing very, very seriously in the class. I'm very conscious of it. And part of the reason is that I have very flexible classes. There's a lot of variation in it. I will go off what students are interested in. There's a lot of successful ways to teach the content. And because, ironically, because of the flexibility in the classroom, being able, a class says, oh, we prefer to look at this rather than that, and accommodating it, I have to be much more on top of the pacing than I would if I went in with the more traditional syllabus of here are the weeks. And and every class, every week, I have to be evaluating, am I on target or not? And then the second part of it is communicating to the students. So because they don't have that formal, here's when we're gonna have these assignments due from day one, the challenge is making sure that they're comfortable. And one of the things I do is send out class notes after each class period with certain information in, including homework and then what's forthcoming. The one student who had said, I like to know in advance. When I know that, I'll say, okay, here's what we're doing next week or the following week. But that becomes the challenge.
I typically provide my students with a very detailed schedule up front, and I kind of use that ramp up method. So in the start, they might be juggling a couple of different things. I typically do a variety of assignments. And so they're juggling in a couple, and they see, and I point out to them very clearly, this is the easy part. It's going to get harder. It's going to get more complicated. And so as we get maybe to week 3 or week 4, something else is tossed in, and now they're juggling another plate, if you want to think about keeping those plates spinning. And then by week 6, there's another one that they're spinning, and then maybe one of them comes off. So they see it, I remind them regularly, and like Steve said, I check in with them after class and I say, both on my end and on their end, are we where we need to be? And if not, maybe I need to put one of those plates on pause and we do a little reevaluation, but I definitely do a ramp up, and I think it goes back to the scaffolding that I mentioned. I'm gonna start you out slow, I want you to have some success, and then I'm gonna keep pushing you so that you've got the rigor that you need to move on and be successful long term.
Now, I do the same thing that Diane does, because I teach business classes. An intro course has an amount of material you have to get through that will culminate into a final project. So to start a class, it takes me a lot of time to do, but I develop a very comprehensive schedule with dates for every single assignment. They know on day 1 everything that's going to be due, when the exams are, what the amount of content is, and I put all of my presentations for them on Blackboard, so if they miss class, they don't miss the content. How I get them to class is the things that are on the exam are bolded on the slides in my presentation. So they can't say, oh, I can go get it from Blackboard and I'll ace the class. Well, you won't, because your study guide is right there bolded, and those are the things I'm going to enhance in class. So I think the predictability is what really matters. In a class that doesn't have a culminating final project, I use the same schedule approach, and I go slow, and then just ramp up as we go. Yeah, just to engage them more. It's more class discussion time as the class goes on, because then they're used to my style and they're used to the way the content fits in the business world.
I have to echo what's already been said, and I think also from what we heard from the video clips from the students, I think students in general really appreciate having everything up front so they know what to expect. And I literally will have students who will schedule their work shifts around when the exams are, so that they don't end up cutting themselves short with study time and having to work huge long shifts, double shifts right before an exam, if at all possible. So by having everything all laid out clearly at the beginning of the semester, it really is a great help to them. And I think as far as the pacing, since we are so familiar with the content, we may already know which parts of the curriculum are going to be really challenging, and others may be much more doable. So we could maybe go faster through the kind of easier sections, and so that we can spend more time going over the challenging sections, so that we don't just kind of breeze through it and leave everyone just completely lost and say, well, we've covered it, and then just move on. So I think, the more you have experience teaching courses, then you kind of know more from your, when students say, okay, I totally, did not get that, and so you can adjust, as we go. But I think, as others have said, having everything all clearly kind of laid out has worked really well for me. And as far as online classes, that means I actually just make everything available from the beginning of the semester. I don't force the students to wait until that official week opens, and then that's only when you can start this thing. Sometimes students will know ahead of time. They have a work-related business trip, or they'll have something in the family. going on that's scheduled ahead of time. So I don't have any problems if students want to work ahead. The only thing would be in weekly discussions, so if they have to respond a certain number of times and it's way ahead, then, they will have to come back and cover that. But as far as their own work, individual work, they can actually do it at their own pace. So I think having things more structured, more clearly laid out with clear expectations in general works best for students. And it's kind of how I work too, so it just works out, I think, better all around. And there's no surprises. And I know I have colleagues who really like doing pop quizzes because they feel like it keeps the students on their toes. I have tried that in the past, and I think I just prefer to do scheduled things. And so I don't do pop quizzes. I think students have a life, and they just, I'd rather have them feel like they're comfortable instead of, they can prepare according to their own personal schedules and come prepared for the scheduled assessments.
So one of the themes that came up in our last session, and again, speaking on here, is communication between the students and faculty and students. Especially if we're talking about pacing, it's one thing if we set out the pace, right, but it's another that the person's unaware, the student's not familiar, they don't intuitively recognize that this project takes more time, or we're building towards this sort of process. So just if you could speak maybe a little bit to communication strategies that you use with your students outside, obviously everyone gets a syllabus, but the way that you might communicate with them. Specifically, I know Joe spoke to it a little bit, but the question that came up from one of our students was a desire to see Blackboard as a medium, and whether you use that or as an alternative, or limitations that you might see in there as well.
I guess we can go back and forth.
Either way, yeah.
It just rotates.
It can rotate.
The on-campus, in classes, of course, we see them, so then we could constantly be just reminding them of due dates that are coming up, projects, how far they should be along, if it's some sort of like a longer term, project, long-term scope. And then I heavily support putting everything on Blackboard and also sending out email. Actually, sending out email is really easy through Blackboard because I just put up whatever announcement I have, you just check that box at the bottom, and it automatically goes to the students. And so even if they don't check into Blackboard, they can see the email, or vice versa. So, it's always there. And I preferred sending out the email earlier before the due date. And last semester I had a student who said, sometimes I don't get your email until the weekend for a Monday class. Well, they've already known about it. It was just actually kind of a reminder. So it's really kind of, it's an extra email. So I feel sometimes we really can't coddle the students too much because they need to be responsible. But I do send out reminder emails, and so I think there's multiple things multiple ways that we can hit them with just kind of staying with a clear communication. So, and then I do my very best to respond quickly to email. I think for a long time I didn't realize that I can get this on my phone so easily, and so then once I had that was a game changer. So you can get the IT department to do your VPN, on your cell phone, so I get it instantly. I don't have to actually officially sit down at my computer to open up my Schoolcraft email account. I see it on my phone, and so I can, if it's a quick question, I can just respond, immediately. And so usually students really appreciate that. If it's something that I need to go to Blackboard to reset something, then I will do that as quickly as possible as well. But then I know already what's going on with the students.
Carol, do you keep your grades posted in Blackboard, traditional class?
Yes, everything is on Blackboard, so I never have students asking me, how am I doing? So it's all on Blackboard. So I use it for both my online classes, my hybrid classes, and my traditional classes. So it's very transparent, and I think I just tell my students at the beginning of the semester, I would like to treat my students the way I would like to be treated if I were a student in this class. So so nothing is hidden, nothing is kind of, so I would hate to have students come to the end of the semester and still have no clue exactly where they stand. So really, I tell them in a sense like, I'm not really giving grades, I'm just kind of recording what you learned. So I'm just, when you are earning your grades, and I record them in Blackboard. And that way also, if there happens to be any data entry, sometimes keyboards just, I just had a student who earned a 37 out of 40 on a test last week, and he came up to me and said, my Blackboard shows 7. I said, sorry. Somehow it's like I actually hit the 3, but it didn't enter. And so that way, I tell them, this is why I keep everything on Blackboard. So you can tell me, I can clear it up right away. We have the evidence of the test, is clearly that he earned 37 instead of 7, and so that can be cleared up as well. So it's a good
It's interesting to think as an instructor that I was in school in a different century than my students. Right? You stop and think about the reality of that. I take let's meet the students where they're at pretty seriously, and I think some of you guys will think I'm nuts in doing this. Day one, I give them my personal email and my cell phone. And I tell them I have the prerogative to answer you or not. So if you ask me questions on text that really are in the syllabus or schedule, I'm not answering you, so don't ask me those types of things. The purpose for providing that level of communication is life happens around them as they're in class. If something happens and you need to text me because you got in a car accident and you won't make it to an exam, I'm going to give you a get out of jail free card. I know you're probably wondering, why would you do that? I think I've gotten 2 texts in my 3, going on my 4th year here. So the students appreciate that, and one of them was an emergency. I do what Carolyn does too. I use Blackboard for absolutely everything. I send an announcement every single week of what's coming up. Having come from a sales background, I know very clearly that they need to be told at least 3 times in order for it to actually go in. So I give them those opportunities. I communicate very heavily on Blackboard. I use announcements. Everything, as you said, is there. And I give them feedback on all their assignments within 48 hours. So they're always up to date. They always have the opportunity to improve if they choose to.
I don't share my cell phone number, but I do use a lot of email with my students. I teach a lot of developmental ed courses, and one thing that I do up front with them day one is I talk about writing an email to your instructor in a way that they're going to respond to you. So we do examples about that. Hey, I'm not coming to class today, versus, hello, Professor Berg, I will be unable to attend class today. Could you please email me this, or asking a specific question, and then signing their name, as well as using their email from Schoolcraft versus hotdude@gmail.com, and then not signing. So I talk with them a lot about that, and I then give them extra credit points if they email me within 24 hours with an appropriate email. And I typically will get maybe 30% of the students that will send me an email. So I try to email and do a lot of communication that way. Another way that I communicate with them is that detailed schedule that I gave them day one. Before they leave every single class, and I put it on colored paper. I'll say, get out your blue papers. And I'll put mine up on the Elmo, and they have theirs out, and I'll say, okay, this is where we are. So tonight's homework is this. Next time we meet, we're looking at this, and oh, look, next Tuesday is an exam on this. So they've got those constant reminders. And again, everything from that is also, as you guys said, posted on Blackboard. I also am a big, all the grades are always on Blackboard. When I return an exam, I tell them, pull up Blackboard. We're in a computer lab typically, so I'll say, go on, pull up Blackboard right now, compare the grade that is on the paper I'm giving you to the grade that you see in Blackboard. And I also have had that come up where it's an easy typo, and I want to fix that right then and there for them. So I don't text them, but I do a lot of emails. And I do email reminders, especially if we have a long break, like over winter break. If there's an assignment coming up afterwards, I'll send them a note the Friday before they come back, say, hey, hope you're having a great break. Just a reminder, when I see you on Monday, you should be bringing this in to me. So I just, I try to be friendly with them as well as the professional.
Unlike you, Diane, I don't give extra credit for sending a proper email within 48 hours. I require it as a graded assignment. So it's, I think that's real important. And it's, I think it helps students, learn how to behave professionally, and that's part of what we're doing. And it also makes our lives much easier because who is this person? I'm in your class, which one? You know, and even if there are two sections of the same class I'm teaching, it doesn't mean we're doing the same thing on the same day. In my class, I don't know yours. So, so anyway, like there's no extra credit for that first assignment. I don't give, I rarely give out my my home or personal email for, or I'm sorry, I misspoke, my personal phone number for texting. There are times if I were off campus, I'm going to be at a conference, the LAN conference later this week. Students are working with teams, and I give them my cell number for texting, but make it very clear that that only works during the scheduled class time, and that has worked so far. I was nervous if it would get abused. But where we can text, or where we, is I use something called Remind.com, and some people are shaking their heads, but with Remind, students can sign up for it. I can send them text reminders, you know, don't forget we're going to be in the library today, those kind of things. And they don't get my email, or I'm sorry, my phone, I don't get theirs, and students have liked that. One of the things that surprised me with the reminders that my online students have really appreciated is that before each week, I send out an update on, you know, here is what's happening during the next week. And even though for those of us who have taught online, there's a schedule that says during this week, here are the assignments, here's everything. There's a learning module that has all of that in, but there is something about that, you know, it's a friendly tone, you know, here's what we're going to be doing, you know, just sort of that overview that students have really liked. And I would not have thought about that had I not listened to students. And then when students will contact me with a question, I will often answer it to the class. And I'll send out, you know, using the Blackboard, and as Carolyn said, it's so easy to send out, I post an announcement in email, and I'll usually say, question from a colleague concerning whatever, and I cut and paste the question, I don't use the student's name, you know, highlight it, and then give the answer, because generally those questions, other people are having them as well. And I've mentioned, you know, already sending out class notes, you know, other kinds of announcements. But one of the big things I do in my class is we have a class culture that life gets in the way, and it gets in the way for all of us. And if students let me know that they're ill or that life has gotten in the way, I work with them. So students are really rewarded for contacting me when they miss, for setting up times, you know, to make it up, because I'm open to that. And I use the example that sometimes I get sick, and I have got one of those flus. I have been sick a lot this semester, I think more than any other semester in the last 20 years. But I acknowledge they get sick, they have car trouble, and I've even gotten some, I was stupid, I slept through my alarm clock. And I say in class, I can deal with stupid. We all do things that are stupid. And so I try to keep that kind of communication going. And like you said, you're trying to answer quickly, and then letting students know when I grade. I grade on the weekends, and my doctor yesterday said, take it easy this weekend. And I wrote to students that here's what my schedule is looking like, here's what I expect to get done. I might not get the following things done this weekend. And by keeping them informed, they don't really care. And in fact, they're really supportive of me and will cut me slack because I cut them slack, and, you know, I treat them like I would want to be treated.